Great. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Nest Southwest, to our first webinar, Wellbeing in Pregnancy session. I'm really happy and excited to welcome Rebecca Powell and Rebecca Hoopley tonight. They are both psychological wellbeing practitioners working for Talkworks, with a special interest in working with women in the perinatal period. And they're here today to talk to us about wellbeing in pregnancy. So without further ado, I'm handing over to you two. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for inviting us along this evening. So we are here to talk to you guys about well-being in pregnancy, and we know that pregnancy and transitioning into motherhood is such a huge transition, and well-being in pregnancy is something then that's really important in that. And we're thinking about emotional well-being, we're thinking about mental well-being, as well as physical well-being as well. And so we have broken down what we're going to talk about with you guys this evening into kind of 4 main sections. So we're going to have a think about attachment and bonding during pregnancy, and how and why that's important, and what you can do to help that process. We're going to think about keeping a balance during pregnancy, and again why that's important, but also the challenges that we might face in pregnancy in keeping a balance, and how to address those challenges. We're going to think about worry, and how kind of worry is really normal in pregnancy and kind of beyond pregnancy as well, but what can we do to help manage that and not let worry become problematic. We're going to think about kind of thinking beyond pregnancy. I think when we're pregnant, it can be really normal to focus on the here and now and being pregnant and gearing up for the birth, but it's also really important, we think, to think about kind of that transition into motherhood and parenthood as well, and what can we do and how can we draw on those other strategies to help with that transition. And then we're going to finish off just by talking a little bit about Talkworks and the work that we do, and how we might be able to help you as a service if you felt like you needed a little bit more support as well. So I am going to start with attachment and bonding during pregnancy. So bonding with your bump, with your baby, whether you kind of think of it as a little person, or your bump, or the kind of baby that's growing inside of you, or whether you're not really bringing it to mind or thinking about it at all, wherever you're at with that is really normal. And there's lots of things that can get in the way of that, whether kind of life's really busy, or maybe thinking about babies really anxiety provoking, or you've had experiences in the past that make thinking about your bump or baby maybe more stressful. That might be kind of previous losses or kind of difficulties in previous pregnancies. But bonding with bump can be really helpful and important in kind of promoting well-being in pregnancy. It's about kind of responding to baby, whether that's kind of responding to baby's movements, kind of by touch, or kind of noticing that they're there. It's really important in giving your kind of self that time and space to just kind of be with the feelings of kind of being pregnant, but also really helpful for baby. So there's lots of research that shows kind of attachment to your bump really helps with baby being able to manage their own feelings and their own emotions as they kind of enter the world as well. So attachment and bonding is really helpful, but we also know that it can be really challenging. And for some people, attachment and bonding to their bump is something that's really happy and is a really kind of positive experience. And some people don't experience that in the same way. So it can be helpful to think about, how can you bring your bump to mind? When do you currently think about kind of your bump and your baby? Is it when kind of baby's moving? Is it the times of the day that you sit down and kind of finally kind of get to the end of the day and you've got your feet up? Is it that you're not really bringing baby to mind at all because of kind of various different reasons? Are there things that you do to connect to your baby? Is it by touch? Is it by singing to your baby? Is it by reading to your baby? And if those are things that you're currently doing, maybe thinking about, how does that make you feel? Is it something that makes you feel positive? Is it something that makes you feel anxious or worried? And just noticing how bonding with your baby might make you feel. Thinking about kind of, what are you imagining about that baby? Are you imagining them when they might be here? Are you imagining them how they're growing? And something that can help with that can be looking at the kind of growth development of your baby. So the NHS website, we've put it in the handout, but has some really good information about where your baby's at kind of week by week as well. So that can be a really good way of bringing baby to mind. Thinking about kind of, what are your hopes for your baby? What are your kind of fears for your baby? And thinking about, how can you bring your baby to mind in your kind of day-to-day routine? Is it that maybe kind of carving a bit of time out in the afternoon or in the evening, time that you might sit and read? Or if you really enjoy kind of, I'm going to bring yours in here, Becky, but Becky enjoys singing, and is there time then that she can sit and sing, and more kind of specifically bringing baby to mind? I find it really difficult. I'm pregnant right now, but bringing baby to mind, because life is really busy. So when I sit down to read to my other children, kind of actively thinking about reading to this baby as well, and just being that little bit more mindful about bringing baby to mind in those moments. And then maybe just reflecting on, what are your previous experiences that might be impacting on your thoughts about your baby, whether they're kind of positive thoughts, whether they're worries, whether they're kind of anxious thoughts, whether they're kind of thoughts about how you were raised as a child, or kind of hopes and dreams that you have about yourself as a parent for the future. Just having a think about kind of, what do you think is impacting on those, because being reflective of those things kind of helps to address them as well. And I think kind of one takeaway thing that would be good to kind of think about in this section is, this next week, what one thing might you do to take some time to connect to your baby? Is it that you're going to do the yoga session after our webinar today, and that becomes your space to connect with your baby, and thinking about the kind of baby that you're growing, and having that time and self-care for yourself? Or is it in another way this week that you can do that? So have a think to yourselves, whether you make a little note. It's in our handout that Hazel and Jodie will send as well, but just that one commitment, one thing that you can do in this next week to take that time to think about your baby and connect with your baby. The next thing that we think is really important in maintaining well-being in pregnancy is making sure that you keep a balance. I think it can be really easy to assume that you can carry on how you were before you were pregnant, and this massive denial, perhaps, I know I experienced it, if I can keep lifting and doing and going at the same pace and not resting and not slowing down, and actually that has an impact, and it can impact on your kind of physical well-being. Do you still have the same energy? Perhaps you might have kind of found the first trimester really difficult, or are finding the first trimester quite difficult in terms of fatigue or sickness, or maybe even that's the case in your second or third trimester. So keeping a balance during pregnancy is really important. But we also know that having a baby brings about lots of practical things that you need to do, kind of rooms that you might need to sort, things you need to buy. Your to-do list grows and grows, and there's always things on your mind. And we can fall in the trap really easily of trying to maintain life and cramming all of these extra things in, often to the detriment of our self-care, often where we don't take that rest, or we're not doing the things that we enjoy doing so much, or taking the time for the activities that maybe are kind of more fulfilling for us because our to-do list seems like it's more important. So something that can be really helpful is to think about categorizing these things. Think about, what things do I need to get done? I need to sort the nursery, I need to sort a car seat, I need to sort clothes, I need to sort work, whatever it might be. But also, what things do I enjoy? What things bring me kind of pleasure and fulfillment that I can still do now in some way, shape, or form? And if you can't do them, thinking about, is there a way that you can kind of modify that? I used to really enjoy running, but I'm finding it really difficult now that I'm pregnant. What is it about running that I really enjoyed then? How can I still get the same enjoyment from this? Is it the exercise? Is it that I ran with a friend? Is it the kind of bit more time and space away from the demands of life that really brought me that fulfillment? So some people might be able to find that they can run through pregnancy and adapt, and that's fine, but some people might not. And think about what you could do differently then. Maybe you're really struggling with fatigue and sickness and really finding lots of any of the things that you enjoy not so enjoyable. Maybe having a think about what other things you could do that might be enjoyable. Particularly then, additionally, thinking about what rest do I need? And I am always shocked by how much more rest you need when you're pregnant. And some days it's more than others, and some weeks it's more than others. And just being really mindful about what your body needs. What is your body telling you that week? And rest really means rest, that kind of feet up. I think feet up is probably one of the best tips of not just sitting down and folding the washing, but sitting down with your feet up. And not just sitting down writing your to-do list, but sitting down with your feet up, giving your body the rest that it does need. And once you've kind of started to think then about what you would like to be doing in those kind of 3 categories, it can then be that bit easier to make sure that you have a balance during pregnancy, that you're maintaining what needs to be done, that you're doing the things on your to-do list, but you're still also doing the things that you enjoy and getting the rest that your body really needs as well. All of those things are going to be really important for keeping that balance during pregnancy. What can be a barrier to this is that you might not be able to do the things that you need to do by yourself, or the things that you enjoy anymore. And it might be around asking for a bit of support. And that can be really hard. It can be really hard when maybe you go from being really independent and can kind of function and do everything by yourself, and you don't maybe often ask for lots of support or don't need lots of support, to then kind of not only saying to yourself that actually maybe I can't do everything right now, but being able to say to other people, I need a little bit of help too. That can be huge. It can be a huge barrier. So maybe thinking and looking at your list and thinking, how much of this can I reasonably and realistically do? Or am I going to end up burning myself out? Is this trying to do all of this having an impact on my mental health? Is it making me feel like I'm failing? Or am I really worried about asking for support and what that might mean? And being specific, then look at that list and think, what is it that I really would like some help with? What's really important on this list that if it was sorted, I'd stop worrying about it, or I'd stop, it would enable me to be able to do the things that I do enjoy, because it wouldn't be a task that needed to be done anymore. What could I really do some help with? And then thinking about who can I ask for help with that. There's lots of people in our network often that are very willing to help, especially when it involves a baby. Having a baby is such a kind of, seems to be kind of a community spirit that people do want to help us. And it can be really difficult to see that when maybe you've been independent or you've not needed to ask for lots of support before. So an exercise that can be really good is thinking about who is in your support network and thinking about specifically who can give you what support. Again, it can be really easy and normal to draw on the same one person or the same couple of people for all the support that we need, especially if you have a kind of partner or a birth partner, or kind of really close family, and you always go to that person for support. And that's understandable. That can end up though putting a lot of strain on that one relationship, or those kind of few relationships. And sometimes that one person might not be able to give us all the support that we need. So something that can be really helpful is thinking about, first of all, who is in my close network, not just who's in my household, but who maybe kind of sits within that kind of close circle, and who maybe sits in that wider circle. Who are the people that are kind of maybe my friends or extended family, or even professionals or kind of community groups that sit in that wider circle. What professionals are in my support network? So whether that's your GP, your midwife, whether you have a health visitor already, whether it might be that you're kind of seeing Talkworks, or you want to see Talkworks, kind of thinking about the professionals that sit in your network. Who is really good at giving me emotional support? Who can I really go to and open up and be true and authentic and share how I'm really feeling with? Who's really good at giving me practical support? Who can help me do the heavy lifting, the painting the nursery, the moving things around, or is really good at problem solving? Who can really help me to see what my options are and help me kind of work through things in my mind? Who makes me feel good? Who do I spend some time with and walk away from that feeling fulfilled, feeling like I've had a good day, feeling uplifted? And who maybe has had a baby? Who's had a baby and understands what I'm going through right now? Or who's had a baby and a similar pregnancy, or has a similar shared experience in some way, has similar values and views on parenting that I feel I could go to for some soundings, for some advice, for some support, or just somebody to listen and say, yeah, that sounds really rubbish and there's not a lot that can be done about it, but I know how you feel. And those people won't all be the same people, but it's really good to kind of just put pen to paper. And it's surprising then maybe who is in your network that maybe you haven't thought of before, or who you haven't thought to draw on for some support before. The next kind of step to that though is actually speaking to them and asking them for a bit of help, and communicating that actually we might need a little bit of support at the moment. And that can be really difficult. It can be really difficult when other people's beliefs or expectations about us or our pregnancy are different. It can be really difficult when people offer you unwanted advice, when they want to share their experience in a really helpful way, but maybe it doesn't make us feel like it's helped us that much. Or they have expectations about us that we just don't want to fulfill, or we're not going to meet in some way. People then might also have negative reactions to what we want to ask or what we want advice on. And often we can worry about all of these things and then don't seek the support that we might need. So maybe thinking about how we go about communicating and who are we communicating to. Thinking beforehand about how easy you find it to communicate what you want to do, or do you end up giving in to other people? And are there particular people that you end up giving into? Do you find that your body language is normally quite open and relaxed? Or do you tend to look away and find it quite difficult to communicate and have these conversations? Do you find that you kind of withdraw or become upset if there's a conversation that's quite difficult? So reflecting on this in the first place can help you to think about maybe what communication skills you might want to think about, or what communication skills you might want to build on. And then in the handout, we have put together a communication planner. And this is really helpful and a really nice tool to start to think about where you might find communication a little bit more difficult, or where there's difficult conversations to be had, or just kind of practicing, kind of asking for some support. Thinking first of all, what do you want to achieve from the conversation? So perhaps it is that I want my partner to help out with some of the household tasks. Normally I'd have loads of time and energy after I finish work to do the cooking and the cleaning and the washing and the sorting, but I'm really struggling right now because I'm that bit more fatigued and I can't maintain everything, and it's really stressful now that the house is falling apart a bit. And thinking then about what is that other person's likely response? Well, if I spoke to my partner, they probably would want to help me. They also would want these things to be done, and they'd understand how I was feeling. Maybe they haven't realized until this point that I really felt like I needed help, or maybe they weren't bothered that the wash wasn't on top of, and they kind of didn't really see that it was a problem. Thinking about when can I have this conversation? Right, as soon as they get through the door probably isn't the most ideal time. If I already had children, when they're all around and kind of demanding attention probably isn't the best time. So maybe thinking, okay, when it's the weekend, when we're both not tired or just finished work or there's lots of life chaos, that's when I'm going to have this conversation. Thinking about what are my barriers to having this conversation. Well, I know I might get really irritable or snappy with my partner because we're both tired, because we both have a lot on, because there's so much to do around the house. And will I end up snapping because they don't see what I see and they don't see that I need help? So to be able to recognize that there's a barrier in the first place helps us to overcome it. Think about, how can I communicate this? What do I want and how can I achieve a good outcome? Well, I really want to be able to just explain what I want help with and why. I'm finding it really difficult to do all of these things because I'm really tired right now, and then asking for help in doing them, and maybe kind of sharing that responsibility and being really specific about the things that I might need a bit of help with. And then thinking about, if somebody came to me with this, if my partner, if this was the other way around, how would I respond? Well, actually, I probably would be understanding. I'd want to help in this situation. I might feel a little bit overwhelmed that I would have more to do, or that there might be a change to my routine in some way, but that we could talk about this and kind of come up with a plan together. And then kind of once you've gone through that plan and thought about it, it's then going and having that conversation and using this as a tool to be able to have that productive conversation, open up those doors that maybe you haven't been able to open up before. It helps us to be really specific about what we want as well. It can be easy sometimes for our communication to be quite emotion-led, and we don't always get a good outcome from that. So thinking about then, how can communication be productive? The barrier to communicating, though, and to keeping a balance in pregnancy, can be our own thoughts, our own fears about what might happen, guilt, feeling guilty about asking for help, by inconveniencing other people in some way, or often those should thoughts. I should be able to cope with this. I should be able to get on with this. I should be able to deal with this. I used to be doing all of these things. Why can't I do it? And looking at other people, or I know somebody who's pregnant and they manage, why can't I? Feeling dependent, like we're always seeking help from the same person, and like I said, that can be really common in relationships, of always seeking support from that one person because they're there, because they're in our support network, but that can then kind of put a strain on that relationship. So looking at the activity around looking at who's in your network can help to kind of balance out those relationships. We can be really anxious about communicating with other people, fear that they might interfere, fear that they might judge us in some way, kind of anxious about what they might be thinking about us, that they might offer unwanted help or unwanted advice, and how am I going to feel about that? Or they might take over in some way and kind of take away from what we really wanted in that moment, or kind of protecting whatever it was that we were communicating about. Those thoughts that we have, though, in those moments really impact on how we feel. We might then feel really stressed about that situation, really anxious about that situation. It might start to make us feel really low or overwhelmed. So being able to kind of notice those thoughts and thinking about how does it make you feel then can help us to challenge it. So there's an exercise that we've put together around identifying what those thoughts were. So an example might be, if I ask for help, my thought might be, they're going to be fed up of me asking for help. That might make me feel really anxious, and that's going to affect my behavior. I'm not going to ask for help. I might struggle on, and then that starts to impact on my physical well-being as well. Or the thought might be, why can't he see that I need help? Why can't he see that I'm struggling around the house? Why can't he see that I need a bit of support right now? I'm feeling frustrated then in that moment, frustrated at your partner or kind of whoever else might not be kind of seeing that you're struggling right now. And what impact does that have on your behavior? It might make me far more likely to snap, to be emotional or irritable for not helping or not seeing that there was a kind of need for help in that moment. Or kind of a situation where the thought is, I can't do this by myself. I should be able to do this by myself, and I can't do this by myself. If though we then are able to kind of identify that and ask for help, that might really have a much more neutral feeling, or we feel productive or positive for being able to ask for help. So being able to change in that moment how we respond and what we do, our behavior, can have a huge impact on how we feel about it afterwards. There's lots of different patterns of negative thoughts that we can get into. Things like, I can't cope, I'm failing, why do other people have it together, why can't I, I'm going to be a terrible mum, I'm going to be a terrible parent. And it can be really easy to believe these thoughts and get stuck in that negative thinking and accepting them as fact because they feel so believable. And they affect then how we feel day to day. They affect what we do day to day, and they become reinforcing then in themselves. So we've also then put together a list of questions that you can ask yourself to challenge these thoughts. Your thoughts are not facts, they're not true, but they are having a huge impact on how you feel. So thinking about, essentially, is there a more realistic way that I can look at this situation? Can I think of a time that this thought wasn't true? What would I say to a close friend who came to me and said this? What would I tell them? We're really good at helping other people. We're really good at helping other people to see something more properly, not so good at doing that for ourselves. So thinking about, what would I say to somebody I cared about if they were telling me this? And flipping that round then, what would somebody I care about say to me? If I told them what I was thinking, what would somebody be saying to me? Would they agree with that thought? Am I starting to overestimate how bad things are? Is it starting to feel like it's spiraling and maybe it's an overestimation of what's going on? If I wasn't feeling like this, would I be thinking this? Maybe I'm feeling really anxious at the moment and that's having a huge impact on my thoughts, or feeling really fatigued or sick or overwhelmed. Is that in itself having a really big impact on my thoughts? Is there another way that I could think about this? Is there another way that I could think about this situation? It might be that your thoughts are around kind of not being able to do as much as you used to be able to do, not feeling like you're coping. Can we think about that differently? You're growing a baby. You're doing something amazing in itself there. Is it a better and more helpful to think about the situation in that way? Are there positive things about me or about the situation that I haven't thought about? So I might not be on top of things all of the time. I might be dropping the ball with things or not able to maintain everything at home. But what am I doing well? What am I succeeding with that I really am not giving myself credit for right now? It might be then thinking about this example then of not being able to do things around the house. I'm tired and I'm not able to do those things, but it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to accept that things might be done differently or not to the same way that they would have done, but I'm taking care of me and I'm taking care of my baby, and self-care has to be important too. And trying to reframe some of those thoughts more positively as well. So both of those things, thinking about communication, who's in your network, but also challenging maybe some of those negative thoughts, will be really helpful and key to being able to keep a balance in pregnancy, being able to do the things that you need to do, but also making sure that you're taking the time for the things that you enjoy and for resting as well. Becky's going to spend a little bit of time talking to us about worry.
Great, thank you, Becky. Yeah, so I'm going to move on and talk to you a bit about worry. And of course, we all know that the antenatal and postnatal period is a time which can be very full of worries. It's a time of a lot of uncertainty and things like that. But first thing I kind of want to say about worry is that it's really normal to worry. Everybody worries. Having some worry is a really natural and sometimes can be a helpful thing. Worry can motivate and energize us to take action. So, for example, if you were concerned about your health, for example, you might that worry might sort of push you to take a bit better care of yourself. You might do a bit of exercise, you might eat sort of healthier meals or something like that, or you say you have a job interview next week and you're worried that you might not be able to answer their questions, or you might not get there on time, that kind of thing. It might then prompt you to prepare more for your interview. It might prompt you to do a test run to get there and make sure you know how long it takes you to get there, and that kind of thing. So it can be a really helpful thing. And like I said earlier, the perinatal period is a time that's sort of full of a lot of uncertainty, and so it's really common that people do experience more worry at this time. You know, there's a lot of uncertainty. You know, if it's your first baby and you're not sure what to expect, you might be worrying about different things. Or if it's your second, third, fourth baby, how am I going to manage a new baby and a toddler? Like, those kinds of thoughts and worries might come up for you. Typically, the most kind of, I suppose, common kinds of worries that people tend to experience in pregnancy and postnatal as well can focus around the baby's well-being or our ability to parent, or it might be the impact of the pregnancy and or giving birth on the body. Also, it might be our health. It might be the health of our partner and those kinds of things. So they're all really sort of normal kinds of things that people tend to worry about at this stage. But what's important to be able to recognise is maybe when that worry has become excessive or problematic. So a way of identifying when worry has become a bit of a sort of a bigger problem for you is, so when worry becomes problematic, you know, you might be worrying too much about things, that it becomes so frequent that it takes up quite a lot of your day, a lot of time in your day. And when it's sort of excessive, it would be that we tend to be worrying about things that we have no control over whatsoever. So generally, for a lot of people, worries, like I said, they're a really normal thing that we experience, but sometimes what, you know, normally they might be quite fleeting and they might not cause us too much distress. But if you start to notice that worries do feel quite distressing and you find them hard to dismiss, so they're not very fleeting anymore, then that's a sign there might be a bit of a sort of problematic level of experiencing. So some of the kinds of signs of when you might be worrying too much would be if you're worrying about things which you have no control, and that worry is taking up a lot of time in your day. The problem with worry is that it can become a bit of a vicious cycle. So the more you worry, the worse your anxiety becomes, and the more time it is then that you're likely to spend worrying. So it just kind of, it keeps going round and round. And sometimes we sort of understand worry in terms of like a worry tree, where we have like the initial worry, which might be the tree trunk, and then off that worry comes several other worries, and then you've got the branches and the leaves all sort of spreading like that. So it can really start to kind of take over. So what I'm going to talk you through now is a couple of simple kinds of strategies that you can do to help yourself to manage worry in a better way. And the reason why I'm not saying I'm going to talk you through a strategy to help you get rid of worry is because it is that really normal thing that everybody does. So what we want to achieve using these strategies is to sort of break into that vicious cycle of worry and to reduce the amount of time spent worrying and to manage those worries in a different way. So a really, really simple technique that you can do is to start off by keeping a diary of your worries. First of all, writing something down on pen and paper and having it, putting it out there in front of you, sort of getting it out of your head and then onto paper in front of you is a really helpful kind of process. And then what you can then do is start to identify what kind of worries it is that you're having. So typically our worries tend to fall into two kinds of categories. We might have quite practical worries. And those kinds of worries tend to be things that are like an issue for us right now. They're a kind of worry where we might need to take action to be able to deal with these worries. And usually, if you then don't deal with these practical kinds of worries and we worry about them rather than dealing with them, we worry about them instead, I suppose you might understand that as like procrastination. So kind of putting off having to deal with something, I'll sort of, I'll do that later, I'll do that later. That what that does is it keeps you kind of stuck in that vicious cycle of worry because you haven't solved it yet or you haven't dealt with it. You're still going to keep worrying and feeling anxious about it. So in the handout that you'll receive after this, we've included a simple problem-solving tool, and it's a really simple technique. And when we are faced with these kinds of practical worries and there's things that we can do about them, if we're trying to solve them in the moment when we're feeling quite anxious and sort of not in a sort of calm state of mind at the time, what can happen is that sort of physical anxiety response that we're feeling, basically what happens is it switches off the clever thinking part of our brain behind our foreheads, the prefrontal cortex, and we can't really, it's kind of like where you can't see the wood for the trees, you can't sort of make sense of the problem, you maybe can't think of solutions. So if you take the time to write that worry down and then go through this problem-solving technique, it's bringing you back to the here and now and you're thinking about it and it's engaging that bit of the brain again. So it's helping you to just kind of feel a bit calmer and look at it almost from a different perspective. So just sort of an example might be a problem that you might be dealing with might be so for example, so my back aches if I stand for more than 15 minutes. Maybe this is a sort of heavily pregnant or pelvic girdle pain, that kind of thing. A lot of people can find standing for long periods quite difficult. And so that's the problem. So you're not able to do things like doing the shopping, for example. So that's identifying what that practical worry is. How am I going to do these things if I can't stand up for long periods of time? And then we think about what's the preferred outcome? What do I want to be able to do? And so we might sort of say, okay, well, I want to be able to do the things that I need to do without being in constant pain. And then the next step of that problem solving tool would be then to start thinking about, okay, what are some potential solutions? So at this point, you wouldn't want to disregard any kind of solutions. It really helps if you just sort of anything goes, just write down anything, get a new back or an exoskeleton or something like that, something really outrageous. It all helps to help sort of generate those ideas. And then you can write down what those possible solutions might be. So for example, it might be speak to my midwife, GP, health visitor about physiotherapy or support with posture. You might do your own research and find out exercises that could strengthen your muscles. Or it might be something really practical, and obviously linking back in with what Rebecca was saying about asking for help. It might be ask somebody to do the shopping for you so you don't have to, or do an online shop that gets delivered to you. So it's a really sort of helpful technique to start to deal with some of those practical worries, those kinds of worries that we can do something about. So that's the first of the two categories. The other category is the hypothetical worries. So these ones are the trickier ones. They're the what if kinds of worries. They tend to be about potential future events that may never occur. So these worries, these worries tend to be about things that could possibly happen in the future, but they're not factual and they're not happening right now. And the reason why they're really problematic is because what can happen is we can end up spending or wasting a lot of time and energy trying to manage or deal with this worry when it may never actually become a reality. It might just continue to be a hypothetical thing that may or may not happen in the future. So a really easy way to identify what is a hypothetical worry is when there's no action that you can take about it. There's nothing you can do about it, or there's nothing you need to do about it, or there's nothing you can do about it right now. So the best way to try to sort of deal with these kinds of worries is to practice sort of letting them go. And I know that sounds a little bit easier said than done. So all of what I'm going to talk you through next are just a few different techniques that can help you to bring your mind back to the here and now when you've got some of these hypothetical kinds of worries running through your mind. First thing, physical relaxation techniques are really good for us. They're really good anyways, generally for everybody. They help to reduce that sort of physical anxiety that we tend to feel in our bodies and get stored up in our tense muscles, you know, when our shoulders are up by our ears and that kind of thing. So some relaxation techniques, I've included all of these in the handout. The first one is sort of progressive muscle relaxation. So that's a technique whereby you progressively go through the different muscle groups in your body and you tense and release those. And then on the handout, I've included a little link to a YouTube video where you can try it out. But if you just do a quick sort of internet search for progressive muscle relaxation, there's lots of different types, lots of different people talking you through it and that kind of thing. So, you know, that's just a starting point on the handout. By all means, have a look and see what other ones you might find. And the other one is doing a simple sort of mindfulness body scan. So that, again, in a similar way to the progressive muscle relaxation, is taking your attention to different parts of the body. And it's a really, really good way of relaxing you. And also those kinds of activities, relaxation techniques are really good in pregnancy as well. They're really recommended. I must give you a warning about mindfulness body scans though, is that when you do them, there is a real risk of falling asleep. I did one this afternoon for myself and ended up turning it into a danger nap where I fell asleep and I didn't set an alarm. And I was like, oh, I've just woken up an hour later, whoops. So just to watch out for that one, make sure you set an alarm in case you fall asleep. So that's a couple of different relaxation techniques, and obviously there's yoga after this as well, so that's really good too. Of course, those different kinds of relaxation techniques, they're a little bit tricky to do if you're finding that you're worrying, say maybe you're at work or you're out and about. So some different techniques that you could use that you can take anywhere with you might be a simple breathing technique, so like the 4-2-6 technique. So breathe in for 4, hold at the top of the breath for a count of 2, and then release for 6. And I've also included on the handout the instructions as to how to do that, and also included a link to a video on YouTube where, so some people might want to look at something visual rather than do the counting breathing. So it's just a short clip of a circle sort of getting larger and getting smaller as you inhale and exhale. So something really simple like that. So really good to kind of bring your sort of the anxious, worried mind back to the here and now, is to focus on your body, focus on your breathing. And another sort of technique that can be really helpful is to practice sort of refocusing our attention using our senses. Again, another set of things that we can take with us wherever we are. And so a really simple one is the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. So that's spotting sort of 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch or feel, identifying 3 things that you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. That might feel like sometimes it's tricky to remember the different senses, so a 3-2-1 might work well, or you know, in trying to sort of get them in the right order. If you were to try to think of 5 things that you can taste, that might be quite tricky unless you've been to an international buffet or something like that. So keeping it really simple, so 5-4-3-2-1, or just 3-2-1, or sometimes just focusing on 1 thing can be really helpful. You know, if that's something that you can feel and is quite tangible, you know, you can focus on the qualities of that. That's also a good technique as well. And then there's also another technique, and I've included this in the handout, where if you wanted to, you could print it out and just keep a copy of it and carry it around with you. And it's something that's called the stop technique. So, and each of the letters stand for something. So stop obviously is the first word, and then it's to take a breath and observe what's going on. What am I thinking? What am I reacting to? What am I feeling in my body? And then the first P, it's spelt with a double P, is to pull back, put in some perspective, have a look at the bigger picture. Is this fact or is it opinion? Or how would somebody else see this? So a little bit of what Becky was saying earlier, I was challenging some of those negative thoughts. In this case, it's kind of looking quite skeptically at the worries that you're experiencing. And then the second P is to practice what works for you. So what's the best thing that I can do for the situation? And again, it's kind of bringing it back round to is this a practical worry? Is there something I can do about it? Or is this something that I need to let go of and move on from, and maybe do a breathing technique or something like that as well? So that's a really, just a summary of a couple of different techniques that you can use to really kind of interrupt that worry cycle in the moment and deal with those hypothetical worries and practice kind of letting them go. And it's definitely something that needs a bit of practice. Obviously, we tend to worry about things that can feel quite intense, can feel quite important to us. So yeah, the more we practice that, the easier it gets. So just to kind of sum up a bit about worry, so just to remind you that worry is a really normal thing that everybody experiences, but just to watch out when it starts to become a bit excessive. So worrying about things that we don't have any control over, those hypothetical kinds of worries. Or they're worrying about the things, and there's a lot of practical worries that we have when we're pregnant, about sort of what do we need to buy for baby, what do I need to do by this such and such a point, telling work about maternity leave, etc. Those kinds of different things. So there's lots and lots of stuff there. And yeah, just a quick summary of those different techniques that you can use to manage some of those hypothetical worries that we can't do anything about. So the relaxation techniques, the breathing techniques, those kinds of things. So that concludes our section on worry. I'm going to hand you back over to Becky, who's going to be talking about thinking beyond pregnancy and what about parenthood.
Thank you, Becky. So everything that we've kind of covered so far is thinking about the things that you might be experiencing kind of whilst you're pregnant, and thinking about the importance of attachment and bonding with your bump, thinking about keeping a balance in pregnancy and the things that might make that a little bit more difficult, thinking about your support network, thinking about communication and your own kind of negative patterns of thinking, and then also thinking about worry, and kind of started to think about some things that might be really helpful tools to help you to maintain your well-being in pregnancy. But they're also really transferable tools, things that you can absolutely draw on and use in your transition into motherhood, in your transition into parenthood. And that transition is significant. It's a huge transition, whether this is your first baby or whether this is your second, third or fourth. Each pregnancy, each birth, each baby brings its own transition. And that's really understandable when you think about the physical changes that you go through, and the physical recovery that you'll go through after childbirth, the hormonal changes that you'll go through in pregnancy and afterwards, the emotional impact and the changes that you go through, the practical impact of having a baby, whether this is your first or third or fourth, thinking about sleep deprivation and also isolation, whether that isolation is real or perceived. There's huge factors that affect that transition into parenthood. And lots of the things that we've talked about today are absolutely tools that you can use in the future, thinking about maybe not attachment to your bump, but how am I attaching to my baby, and are there things that I can do to connect to my baby, also connecting to my other children if I have other children, or my partner, my friends, people in my network as well. Thinking about how can I keep a balance now that I've had a baby, how can I keep a balance in my life, how can I make sure that I'm attending to baby's needs but my own needs as well. How can I maintain communication, especially when I'm sleep deprived, especially when I feel really isolated? How can I deal with those negative thoughts that might start creeping in, or managing worry that is present or kind of becomes more difficult, especially when we're sleep deprived or feeling overwhelmed a little bit more. So all of the tools that we've covered can really help with that transition into parenthood. But also more specifically, some future problem solving can be really helpful as well. Thinking about what might be some common problems I might experience as I transition into parenthood, and thinking about it now before I'm there, before I'm sleep deprived, before I'm worried about it, before I'm anxious about it, before I need support in the middle of the night, thinking about what are my options and kind of pre-problem solving there. So is it around feeding? I want to breastfeed, but I might have difficulty with that. So can I pre-problem solve now? Where can I go to for support? Can I come along to the nest or the nestlings group? Or do I need to find kind of specific breastfeeding peer support? Is there stuff online that I can just save in the bank for the future? Will save some anxiety perhaps when you might come to that in down the line. So pre-problem solving can be really helpful. There can also be lots of anxiety around, will I still be me? Will I still be able to do the things that I enjoy doing? And so thinking about this a little bit more specifically, we've put some questions and activities for you to think about, but what's important to you? What activities make you feel like you, bring you joy, bring you fulfillment, and are they realistically sustainable once you've had a baby? What adjustments might you need to make, or what actually is going to fall off your radar but maybe will be taken over by something else? How am I going to maintain my close relationships? How am I going to communicate with these people, and how are they going to communicate with me when we are sleep deprived, or when I am feeling isolated, when I start to withdraw? How am I going to put a plan in place with my friends and family or my support network or whoever might be there to help me through this period of time? But having a baby can be one of the most rewarding things in life. Parenthood does come with its challenges, motherhood does come with its challenges, but it also brings so much joy and happiness and pride too. And we hope that this webinar has given you lots of tools that might help you to keep a balance, to look after yourself and your well-being in pregnancy and beyond. But I think what's really nice, and a question to kind of finish with, is thinking about, what are you really looking forward to about after the birth of your baby? When your baby's here, what are you looking forward to the most? Whether it's in those initial days or weeks or months to come, what is it that you picture kind of brings you kind of happiness or joy? And allowing yourself to think about that and sit with that and feel the joy of having a baby. We're just going to very briefly, I'm going to hand back over to Becky just to talk a little bit about Talkworks and who we are as a service and what we can do. And if you felt like you needed a little bit more support, kind of what could happen next.
Thanks, thank you. So I'm just going to give a very quick overview of a little bit about Talkworks. So Talkworks is a free confidential NHS service for people who are aged 18 and over across Devon. So just need to be registered at a GP surgery in Devon. And basically we offer a range of evidence-based treatments like CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy. We work relatively flexibly now, given that it's COVID. A lot of our work that we usually do in the community is a little bit on hold at the moment, but we've been able to still offer a lot of treatment and support remotely, so via phone and online and video calls and things like that. We prioritise women in the perinatal period, so when they're pregnant and up to 2 years after the birth of their baby, and we aim to offer people an assessment within 2 weeks of when you initially contact the service. And typically sort of outside the perinatal period, we aim to see people within 6 weeks of contacting the service, but actually most of the time we can see people a lot sooner than that, so usually within sort of 2 to 3 weeks. And we offer what we call sort of collaborative care, so we can link in with people like your GP, midwife, health visitor, those kinds of people who are also involved in your care. And so what can we help with? We can help with lots of different things. Depression, generalized anxiety, panic disorder, social anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, birth trauma, obsessive compulsive disorder or OCD, and maternal specific OCD as well, stress, low self-esteem, health anxiety, bulimia and binge eating disorders, and agoraphobia, and also sleep problems as well. So we do lots and lots of different things at Talkwax. So in terms of what the kind of process actually looks like, is we would start off with an initial assessment that would usually take about 45 minutes, and sometimes that would lead to perhaps referring on to a different service, or it might be signposting to different sort of services in the community, like specific kinds of counselling that are available and that kind of thing, or it might then lead on to doing some further work with us and engaging with some of the different therapy that we offer. So the different kinds of things that we offer are one-to-one kind of working therapy over the phone or video call at the moment. We are able to offer a few face-to-face appointments at the moment. We also have online kinds of therapy that can be helpful. So we have like an online CBT platform called Silver Cloud that a lot of people get on really well with. We do a range of different educational courses. So for people who are pregnant or postnatal, we do what's called Talkworks for Parenthood. That's a 2-hour workshop that anybody can sign up to. And we also do a postnatal wellbeing group, which is a 10-week program, in which you sort of get to go through some therapeutic techniques and meet other mums and things like that. So we're still doing that remotely at the moment, which is great. And so then the last thing to just tell you a bit about is how you can refer yourself to Talkwax. So it's really, really simple. You can do it yourself by visiting our website and completing a very quick and easy web form. On the handout, I've included the link to that website. Or if you sort of have contact with your GP, midwife, health visitor, or any other healthcare professional, they can also refer you to us. And so on that note, that brings me to the end of of Rebecca and my sort of section there on wellbeing in pregnancy. Thanks very much for listening to us.
Wow, Becky and Rebecca, thank you so much for that information. There's a lot to take on. I'm really looking forward to having the handout afterwards as well to kind of digest. So that's fantastic. I'm going to stop recording.